Hey guys, Faded Forest here, your Deputy Commissioner for the upcoming 2017-2018 FBA season. Just wanted to sit down with you real fast and go over a small change we made to player contracts that will play a big role in the free agency this coming period, as well as contract renegotiations, going over them and what was implemented back in 2015 that people may or may not have known about and how to best utilize contract renegotiations. So first, going over contract value. In the past, we've had people bring up the idea of making contracts directly correlate to how many points a player receives each season for boost. We kind of did not like that idea in the sense that it just rewarded paying players a lot of money, and we would see the money centralized around a couple people. It doesn't necessarily reward creativity or content. But we didn't want the money just to have no value whatsoever, period, because there's no incentive for players to necessarily take a bigger contract. So what we've decided to do is introduce a bonus roll each boost period. Each boost period will have a lottery roll with a winner receiving an extra 5 points added to their player boost for that cycle. An example would be a player with a $15 million contract will receive a 15% chance of getting that extra 5 points for that boost. And with 3 boost cycles in a year, that means that there's a maximum of 15 extra bonus points available to a player. We hope this encourages players to consider the value of their contracts. $1 or $2 million doesn't make a huge difference if a player is receiving a $20 million offer and a $17 million offer. That's really not a huge percentage difference in terms of the chance of winning extra bonus points, compared to if someone had a $20 million offer and decided to only take $10 million, they would get half of the probability of getting bonus points. It is important to notice that the bonus points aren't going to determine whether or not your character is good in the league. 15 points is a fourth of the maximum you can receive from your head coach, which is 60. So now, instead of 60 being the max for a season, 75 is the max. Over time, that will make a difference. It's not going to be the main difference maker. The main difference is still always going to be how active you are in the community, whether it be content or other contributions to the league and sustaining it, and being rewarded through the head coach boost yearly. This does, though, give players another way to stand out. Hopefully, players will again consider this going into the free agency this period. Now, going into the contracts, there will be a period 2 weeks before free agency starts where some players will be eligible for contract renegotiations. Now, these contract renegotiations must meet certain criteria. First of all, the player must have completed the first 2 years of their contract, and they cannot be entering the final year of their existing contract. The player must not have an active no-trade clause, or they must waive it. Players undergoing renegotiation are considered unrestricted free agents and may entertain offers from other teams, even sign and trade deals. That means that a player undergoing renegotiation is a free agent in essence. Fourth, a player undergoing renegotiation cannot have a no-trade clause added to any new contract, and a renegotiated contract can only be for a maximum of 2 years. Now, that is player-initiated and team-initiated. There are a few more restrictions put on team-initiated, which we'll go over on the next slide. First of all, the player, if it's being team-initiated, must have a contract value of at least $6 million per year left. So if a player has an average contract value under $6 million, they are not eligible for team-initiated. But as a player, they can still initiate it as long as they meet the other criteria on this slide. Now, another thing for teams is they're limited to only 5 renegotiation requests per offseason. Players are able to deny a renegotiation request from a team. If a team asks a player to renegotiate and the player decides that no, they don't wish to renegotiate, that counts as one attempt, and they can't renegotiate outside of the one renegotiation amnesty. Teams are given a yearly renegotiation amnesty that they can use on any single player that refuses permission to renegotiate. This terminates any obligation between the team, just like a regular amnesty, but is limited to the 2-week renegotiation period. Basically, this gives the team one chance to renegotiate a contract as long as they're eligible, again, based on these criteria and that $6 million criteria. And there are some risks, obviously, involved with renegotiation we'll go over in a second. But first, I wanted to kind of cover an example of who's eligible for renegotiations. So let's say in bizarre world, Healy Davis decides that he's coming back to the FBA after retiring 17 years ago. A team decides to sign him for 5 years at those contract values, or maybe alternate scenario, they sign him for 4 years. The years marked in red, he's ineligible for renegotiation. He has to complete his first 2 years, so that would mean his first contract season he can renegotiate would be 2020. Now, if he has a 5-year deal, he also gets 2021 to consider renegotiating. However, if it's a 4-year deal, that 2020 year is the only year he can renegotiate. Now, what this means for teams and GMs is that when a player signs a contract, they are basically on your team no matter what for 2 years. If they sign for 4 or 5 years, there is a chance that they could ask for renegotiation. If it's a 3-year contract, because of that 2-year clause and that final year clause, a 3-year contract can't be renegotiated at any point. Now, why might a player... one more thing. The contract year, how you determine if someone is eligible, you can look on their bio page and you'll see the contract year and how many years they have left on their contract. As long as 2 years have been completed and they're not in their final year, that's a good indicator. This player, back when we had 7-year contracts, signed a 7-year one, and they've completed now 4 years of that contract. They have 3 years remaining, so they'd still be eligible for 2 more seasons to renegotiate. Now, why might a player want to renegotiate? With this new bonus lottery system for boost, they may feel that they're undervalued. They're not being paid what they deserve. So by giving them a chance to renegotiate, they're able to fix their value as a player. There are a lot of stars in the league that are overpaid. There's a lot of stars in the league that are underpaid. Normally, teams in the NBA are able to renegotiate contracts in order to appease their player. So this is something we're able to do rather than having a player like the player given above an example was a 7-year contract. That's a long time for a player to get better or worse. So that gives them a chance to adjust from being stuck in a contract for 7 years, grossly underpaid. It also gives the player a chance to re-enter the free agency earlier. Sometimes if a player has signed a 7-year deal, that means 7 years they're not going to be in free agency. This league has been around for a little longer than that, but that's not a lot of... A player who signed that contract in the first year of free agency would only have just been coming up on free agency. This gives a little bit more action in the offseason, potentially, as long as they meet those requirements. Third, in certain situations, it might actually mean that the player is able to shorten their contract down to a 3-year deal. Rather than finishing out their contract, they're able to get it down to 1 more year, whether or not they're retiring or they just want to finish up with the team and then pursue a championship team. That's another option a player might decide, that why they want to renegotiate. Now, why might a team want to renegotiate? Well, as I said before, there are players that are overpaid, players that were signed for 6-7-year deals back in the day for $20+ million who are on the bench now. And that's a huge chunk of cap space that can't be cleared no matter what, and no team is able to take that on. So this gives them, GMs, a chance to potentially fix those contracts and make the team viable again. Of course, they only get 1 per year that they can force. So it's not like they can just take over a team and instantly renegotiate every player. Even if they met all the criteria, they'd only be limited to that 1 guarantee and then 4 potential with the player consenting. Now, another reason a team might want to renegotiate is because another team is unwilling to take that player in a trade unless their contract is lower. Again, a player's overvalued. No team is willing to take on that contract unless it's been renegotiated down to a lower amount. Maybe get it down to half the value, then a team will be willing to take the player. again, another scenario that you might see a team want to renegotiate with a player. Now, there's obviously risk involved with renegotiating. Your contract is, for the most part, guaranteed outside of an amnesty. So what kind of risk would a player face? Well, if a player decides to initiate it, there's no guarantee that they will receive offers from any team. They may end up not receiving an offer at all and end up going into restricted free agency, or the team may decide that they renegotiate with, if they see no one else making an offer, they may make a lower offer than the original contract the player was on. If a player who is making $10 million thought that they could make 20, but then they get no offers, they may only end up getting paid $5 million. So a player risks not getting the money back that they were currently making. It's a gamble on their part. Now for a GM, if they decide to renegotiate, they may end up losing this player because other teams are going to get to make an offer, and they may make a better contract offer, or they may have better opportunities for the player to play in the team. And if the GM is forced to use the amnesty renegotiation, that's just going to piss the player off because they did not want to renegotiate, and now you've possibly forced this player out of your team. So as your team staff considers renegotiating players, there's a couple things to consider, and as players want to think about it, again, going back to the requirements, you must be eligible. The biggest eligibility clauses are going to be has to have completed 2 years, and it can't be in their final year. And then the fact that the players are considered unrestricted free agents, outside of the fact that they are limited to only signing a 2-year deal. So if a player or a team initiates a renegotiation, this player can only receive a maximum of 2 years. They cannot receive a full 5-year contract. So they'll be entering free agency no matter what within 2 years anyways. And then again, for team staff, important, they need to talk to the players if they want to renegotiate. They can renegotiate up to 5 players that fit the other requirements. However, the player has to accept. If the player does not accept, they are allowed 1 renegotiation amnesty. That's the only one they get for the season, so it needs to be important that they communicate with their players and figure out if they can avoid having to use it. Outside of that, it's pretty much standard what the free agency is going to be like. These players and staff have until September 1st to decide if they're renegotiating, because September 1st will be when the free agency offer period begins, and any player that is up for renegotiation will be eligible for offers from other teams. Outside of that, if there are any questions that you may have, either as a contributor who has a player that they want to renegotiate, or as a team staff who wants more clarification on some of these requirements, please feel free to email either commissioner@furrybasketball.net or committee@furrybasketball.net. Also, if you're on Slack, you can always reach out to Rourke or I, and we'll be happy to answer your questions as needed. Thank you all for tuning in, and get ready for some fun free agency coming right around the corner. Bye.